nice thing comes from my my desire to try and unite the libertarian movement as well. And when I say that, I use the example of an elevator. I view that, we are now on the 100th floor of a skyscraper, and the elevator's on that 100th floor. It is crazy, out of control, monstrous government that tries to control everything you do. And we have some people down in the basement who think that's complete anarchy. All I say is, let's move that elevator down and find out what makes the most sense. I mean, maybe it's the 50th floor, maybe it's a 20th floor, but at least moving the progression in the right direction is what I'm trying to accomplish. And so when you say it would be nice, I think that's what I'm thinking, is I'm looking at the real world of today. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, this is the reality of what we have today. This is where I believe we should probably want to go to make everybody a lot happier. And so, when I say it would be nice, I think I'm thinking about, let's put the elevator on the 20th floor and see what happens.
All right.
I want to clarify that.
Fair enough.
Now, back to medical.
Well, so just be specific of
Yes.
what the 20th floor is, because I think if we get down to your 0 floor, we have anarchy, and we have no taxation, and we're living in the feudal state, and it's, maybe it's not quite Game of Thrones, but it's pretty close. But you want to take it to halfway there. And so, specifically, I mean, if you have no plans for the medical profession, we don't have to spend time on that. That's just your sort of like best case scenario where we have doctors, licensing themselves. But so let's say Gary Johnson become president. I mean, what do we do? Cut Social Security and Medicare? Because no?
No. What all Gary wants to do with that is to move it to the states to basically make it a better situation where it cuts the cost of the implementation and management of those programs. Now, Gary's
wait a
not
second.
for cutting safety net.
How would you cut the costs by having Social Security, and Medicare for that matter, which are incredibly efficient systems? I mean, 97 cents of every Medicare dollar goes towards coverage. How, if you made 50 agencies that had to check eligibility, that had to do all that stuff, how would that be more efficient than having at least one agency that then instructed people across the country? I mean, would it be efficient when, you moved from Arizona to Texas? That seems to me to be incredibly inefficient.
Well, let me ask you, Sam. Aren't these infrastructures already in place in these states when it comes to dealing with things like Medicaid and their own types of public assistance that exist in those states? It seems like they already have those infrastructures, no?
They have information that is aggregated on a federal level, but if you take out the federal aggregation of that, then these people have to do it, and they have to create all sorts of different type of coordinating with other states, right? Because, I mean, then you need to coordinate going state to state if people move. You need to have presumably 50 different eligibility levels, right? Where there's no, I mean, or are you saying that we would still have a federal mandate, but the states have to do it as the feds want it? I mean, how would this work?
Not sure, but it seems to me like the states already deal with a lot of these things, and I think that when you have an infrastructure that's closer to the I think when you have infrastructure that's closer to the people have more input in that infrastructure, and that's why I believe more in the states than the federal government.
I mean, if you look at the example, let's say the Medicaid expansion, right? There are a lot of states where you have literally hundreds of thousands of people who are being denied health insurance because of the state. I mean, for you, that's just an outcome of whoops, or what?
Excuse me?
I mean,
I think that's what the courts are for. I mean, that's the thing. There has to be. I mean, that's why I believe in the courts, because they adjudicate disputes. And I think my big problem when it comes to regulation is that these people are making rules with the force of law, and they never received one vote to do it. So I believe that violates the Constitution. That's another problem I have with it, in addition to the additional expense. It just seems to me like there are so many better ways of doing things, but growing a bloated federal government becomes just much more expensive. And then when you force people to pay money to support that system, which oftentimes harms them, I think that's a lot to ask.
Wait a second. So if we were to move, let's say, Medicare to the states, right? Mm-hmm. You're not talking about block grants. You're talking about they would raise the taxes. They would implement Medicare. Presumably it would be different from state to state, right? Like some state would have you can have it at 65. Some maybe you don't have it at all. Is that it? Or
as long as it's up to the people to decide.
Well, don't you think that there are instances where you have elected officials who, may decide they're not going to take, let's say, Medicaid funding, and then you've got hundreds of thousands of people, for example, who are denied health care. That's a sort of a tough luck scenario in your perspective.
I don't see that happening.
It's happening right now.
I really think that left to the free market to resolve things, I think that the ingenuity of people allows for better solutions.
Steve, that's happening right now in over a dozen states where Republican governors, and I think there's one Democrat too, I think, and Republican legislatures are denying people Medicaid because they didn't take the Medicaid expansion. That's happening right now, and there's no private solution for that.
Well, I mean, there could be. I mean, the private solution
really?
would be people. Of course, there could. You know what? There are
so
many.
What would be
clinics.
The private solution for providing health care to the poorest people, or people living from 100% to 133% poverty?
Mm-hmm. Well, it'd be the same thing as pro bono legal. You know, there'd be some pro bono.
Why doesn't that exist now?
Well, I think because right now the doctors are starving because of the regulation they're dealing with now and the lawsuits and everything that's just destroying their practice.
Doctors are starving?
A lot of them are not doing well. Look at how more difficult it is now to get into your family doctor than it was 20 years ago.
Well, wait a second.
It's because they've had to increase their volume to such a high extent in order to cover the reduction in what they're earning and the offsetting additional costs of regulation and malpractice insurance.
With all due respect, let's start with malpractice insurance. I mean, we can compare states that have essentially outlawed malpractice tort cases going back to the courts in civil courts. We have states where they have minimized damages there, and insurance costs have made no difference. And we have the highest paid physicians in the world here. You'd be hard pressed to find any country in the world, I think, that has where doctors make more money. And so the private market has not been able to, and we're certainly no more regulated in terms of medicine than any other country. I mean, for gosh sakes, the rest of the world, where there's far more regulation and on doctors through single payer health insurance, or in some instances governments that actually run the healthcare system. I mean, so where are you getting this? What are you comparing this to? This idea that doctors are starving and that's why they haven't created all these pro bono clinics for people who are living in poverty to get health care.
Well, I'm starving is probably an exaggeration. Yes, some of them are doing very well.
The average salary for doctors is over $200,000.
Okay, but once again, when they go into private practice, it becomes a different situation where and it's very hard to pinpoint exactly everything I'm discussing now when it comes to regulation, but I can say that the costs continue to climb. And this is where you have a problem when you bring too much government into it. They don't do what it takes to cut the costs of providing health care. They just want to fund it and pay the exorbitant cost to comply with regulation.
Medicare actually reimbursement rates are far lower than private insurance reimbursement rates because they serve 45 million Americans. They actually can have a better sense of what is efficient care and what's not. And in fact, that's the biggest complaint about that doctors have in Medicare is their reimbursement rates are actually a function of how efficient the care is. So it's the private market where you have doctors, the private insurance market is where they're getting more money. I mean, what you're saying does not add up. I mean, there's no reason now why, and I don't know what it is that we would get rid of that you think would open up the door for doctors to give all this pro bono work. But the more they get paid per hour, right? I mean, we've already established that that humans end up working in their own best interest. Well, if a doctor knows that they're going to make even more money per hour, aren't they going to be less inclined to give that hour away for free?
It depends.
This is
it
your
depends
daughter,
on the doctor.
and she just got
Hold on for 1 second.
Oh boy. But you've got hum. So
I had Sorry, I had a problem on my computer. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think some will and some won't, and that's what a voluntary society is about. And I think that there are some people who really embrace the desire to help others, and some people who don't care.
Don't you think those
You know,
people are doing that now?
I think they could probably do more.
Hey, it's Sam Seder. Why don't you subscribe to this channel? You can do so right over here. Some over. Subscribe.